Hello everyone, and welcome to Fleet's Catch-Up Ramblings. Yes, here we are. I hope you're all ready for what will hopefully be an exciting live stream. Your source for the best answers this side of the Milky Way. As we like to say in Ramblings, answers guaranteed. Good answers, your mileage may vary. Always consult your proper historians and Wikipedia if you feel like Fleet has given an answer that you don't think is right. Always read the label. Fleet Devotions is not responsible for any bad answers given on his behalf. Because, well, I am not an expert and I never claimed to be. God, I'd hate to declare myself an expert. I'm just not. I know things and stuff. I know enough to get by. That's what matters. That's the important thing here. There we go. There we go. I hope everyone's having a good Friday. I know I have had a good Friday. It's a very good Friday. Very, very good. Happy days are here again. All is right with the world, folks. Where is... Ah, yes, that's the one more thing I want to do. Oh. What's the point of having your own server if you don't get to announce your own streams in your own server? I mean, come on, what's the point? Ah. And then into Theatre at Sea we go. Marvelous. There we go. All is right with the world. Right, so the first thing we need to do is we need to get the where is it? Ah, yes, here we go. And I pinned it to make sure I wouldn't lose it, trying to streamline the process. You know, I probably should get this open before I should probably start getting this open before... I'll get there. We'll get there. The efficiencies will come. I get better at it every time. There we go. Oh, shut up! You bloody fox lover.
No, what?
It was the only thing I could think of on the spot.
Oh,
okay.
I'm sorry, Boop.
Fuck off, you cheeky
I'm sorry
git.
that's the best you have to come up with, Boop of Oceans.
Oh, fuck off, you cheeky git. Hello, Timu. Hello, Mega Scroll. It's nice to see everybody here today. Okay, down we go.
Hello.
So all the way down to I have to do some from. There's still some from 67 to get through, and then there is some from 68. So, without further ado, let's get on with it. Okay, so we did that one. What if the Greek Navy managed to get the Salamis and the Britannia I forgot the name of in the interwar period? So the Britannia was Alexander Komnenos, I think it was. Or Alexis Komnenos, I believe, was the name of the Britannia. Either way, it's fairly... If they manage to get... Well, here's the thing. The Greeks can get Salamis or the Britannia, not both. And they knew that when they ordered them. They knew they were going to have to sell one of those two ships. And that was always something they were fundamentally aware of. The Greek economy simply could not afford two dreadnought battleships. And to be honest with you, Salamis is a better ship in every metric than a Britannia. So they're going to keep Salamis. And she'll likely be retained without refits until she's probably... She's either sunk by the Luftwaffe or escapes to join the Mediterranean fleet. At which point she basically becomes an equivalent to an R-class battleship given her probably degraded condition. Honestly, the Turks would probably consider Yavuz enough of an answer to her, given Yavuz has 2 more guns, even if they are much smaller, and she's much faster. And of course, there's always the modern Turkish submarines and destroyers and air power as well. Because remember, if the Greeks are getting Salamis, they won't be able to buy some of the more modern destroyers and submarines that they do during the interwar period, because she's going to eat up a lot of their budget.
It is harder to get those 10 guns on targets than necessarily it would be for Salamis, though. But,
the Turks did a lot of work when they refit it.
But I'm pretty sure they still have pretty limited firing angles.
No, it's not as good
as
it's not as good as it would be for a Sentinel Line map, but the Germans with their battle cruisers were very, very good at giving them decent arcs. They actually aren't just... They've got better arcs than you think. Especially in the article, this is a catch-up ramblings. We are not taking new questions at this time. This is a catch-up ramblings. We are catching up. So very quickly.
So save that question for Monday.
Yeah. How could the Brooklyns have been updated in the post-war environment, seeing as they were decent light cruisers with 15 6-inch guns? The problem you've got with the Brooklyns is that while they're very good cruisers for a World War II context, by the time you get to the post-war world, you're talking about them they're very overloaded now. They've got radar and anti-aircraft fits that they were never expecting to carry in their life, being carried on them. They're very weakly protected compared to some of their peers. So, for example, if you put a Cleveland next to a Brooklyn, a Cleveland's just...
Yeah.
The armor's only slightly thicker, but it's better laid out. There's more of it. And a Cleveland is much better set up to generate the sort of power you need to run some of the better, the more powerful electronic systems that are coming in at the end of the war. It's just... They're old ships. They've been around since They've been around since 1930.
Cleveland's 2,000 tons heavier as well, which allows a lot more to work with.
Yeah, and you notice that with the Clevelands, they dropped the 5th turret for a more well-rounded ship, and it resulted in some very, very, into a very, very, very effective class of cruisers.
I mean, fundamentally speaking, Brooklyn is basically what you're trying to fit as much firepower into a treaty-compliant ship. Cleveland.
Yeah, it was a focus on firepower with potentially other options.
Now, of course,
Cleveland's just basically, how do we protect something the size of Brooklyn?
Yeah. Now, of course, for the but it did give them more room to be upgraded later in the later on down the line. Whereas the Brooklyns, you've got more of a problem. I mean, you see what happens when they're shipped off to the various South American navies. There's not really much you can do with them in terms of upgrades. Slightly better fire control, some plug-and-play point defense missiles. But that's basically it.
I mean, yeah.
But
obviously, fundamentally, it's still not a ship you want to screw around with in the 50s, but it's not... You can't push it past
the
that.
The problem is, by the 50s, you're dealing with things like Sverdlovs, Clevelands. You're dealing with cruisers that are just better laid out and more heavily protected than the Brooklyns are.
Yes, but you're still not scoffing at that 15 6-inch guns, because it's still the same guns as the Clevelands.
To be fair, if I was to try and make one of these more modern, I wouldn't keep it with 15 guns. If anything, I would scrap that the third turret at the front.
Yeah, honestly, if you want to
drop it down to 2 turrets at the front.
Yeah, if you want to do any reworking at all, that's why the US didn't keep them, because if you want to do any reworking at all, you have to remove the 3rd turret, and at that point...
Well, no, not just that. The Brooklyns ran ragged.
Oh yeah, there is the World War II service to consider, of course.
They would be ridiculously expensive to bring them back to good conditions. So selling them is logical.
Yep.
Especially the fact that when you have a pile of Clevelands to just work with, so it's either throw in reserve or get whatever money that you can out of them.
Yeah, by selling them. Wouldn't it have been better to use new mounts with remote control systems rather than swap them with other mounts on the Renown? New mounts for what?
Yeah, it's slightly confusing about that question as well.
Remote control.
Yep.
Yes,
Remember,
there's-
I just copy. I remember, I just copied the questions one for one. I have no clue. I
Ooh.
almost partly assume could it be referring to the fact that Renown in her late when she was about to go to the scrapyard, she was going to have brand new 4.5s installed that were fully computer well, basically computer, basically fully connected and linked. But
Yeah, that's a question that we might have to. Might be worth asking that one again on whoever asked that question. Whoever you are, you will know who you are. If you ask that again on Monday with more context, then that will be very. That would be very. We can deal with that. Why did the British go for more light carriers as opposed to the construction of armoured carriers in World War II? Because they were already building armoured carriers and they needed hull numbers. And they already had the yards that could build armoured carriers building armoured carriers. And they needed something that could go into the yards that, say, might build a large cruiser. Or perhaps a smaller ocean liner. And hence you get the light fleet carriers. That's basically the long and short of it. It's just trying to find a way to use up as much slack capacity as you can.
And plugging up the numbers.
Why not complete Alaska, seeing as she was nearly finished in construction? I mean, Alaska was completed.
They did.
Yeah, Alaska was completed. So was, I think,
Guam
Yeah,
was.
yeah,
Well,
Guam.
The
but
third
I
one was
wonder if
not.
I'm wondering if they're referring to Hawaii because she was 84% complete.
Oh, basically because they were looking at what the Alaskas cost to run and what they got from running them and saying, this thing costs 80% as much to crew and run than an Iowa. So why would we build another one? Like, for 20% extra running cost, we can get an Iowa.
To be fair, though, there were also plans for what they could use Hawaii for. If they actually did those conversions, I think it might have been worth it.
Yeah,
but...
the only way. The
fundamental issue is just post-war U.S. Navy don't have the money to maintain everything. And if they could save money by quite literally just not finishing Hawaii, that's what they decided. They absolutely could have done something with her. Well, technically not really. To be fair, it's 84% complete, so you're most likely gonna have to complete her as is. And it's a little bit past World War II. You're not. There isn't too many new things.
You are correct, Yuki. Ship number 4 was meant to be USS Philippines. 5 was USS Puerto Rico, and 6 was USS Samoa.
Yes. They were mostly named after U.S. overseas territories. But yeah, fundamentally speaking, there isn't anything new you could really throw on the Alaskas at the time. You will be building her as is, and then she will immediately head into mothball, basically.
No, Hawaii was meant to be a fully guided missile cruiser with command and control capability.
No, they were thinking about it, but
that was what. Yeah, but that was
one of the proposed.
Okay, yes,
that's what I mean. Like
that would have been a good way of doing it, but
yes, but to be fair, when we're talking about the guided missile on Hawaii, we're talking like JV2 Loon, basically AV1.
Yeah,
better than nothing.
Yeah, but anyway, so moving on. So the next question is, since the Soviet army captured the Vesa, why not complete her as another cruiser for the Red Navy? Well, first of all, they didn't. She was scuttled, and in a rather bad way. Secondly, that she was halfway through the conversion from Seydlitz, the cruiser, to Vesa, the aircraft carrier, and at that point, she's just a mess. You'd either have to. The problem is she's been scuttled. She wasn't finished. It's not like Graf Zeppelin, where, to be fair to the Russians, they could have finished her with relative ease if they had wanted to expend the effort, because her engines were in place, and yes, they have been, well, unfortunately, her engines have been blown up by the SS, but Graf Zeppelin could have been relatively easily completed by the Russians. It would have been fairly simple to spin up a revised design and finish her, because she was more close to being done. With Vesa, the problem you've got is that she's down to the upper deck. by the time she's moved from
So actually, they did plan on using her, but it didn't in the end.
well, they can't. She's scuttled. They didn't.
She was in shallow water, and there was plans to raise her and use her components to either work on her again or finish Lutzow,
Yeah,
which they had, which was then renamed Talon.
Yeah, I know.
Which,
but again, that's not to do with Vesa herself.
well, it is.
Well, no,
they did have some ideas of using it. Wessa is Seidlitz.
Basically, in regards for completion as a cruiser, the answer's really quite simple. The Russians were already spinning up the Sverdlov printer. And for the post-war world, the Sverdlovs are far better cruisers than the Hippers. It's as simple as that, basically.
Logistically speaking, it's also going to be a mess trying to operate Satellites with a bunch of Sverdlovs as well.
Yeah, and of course, if you complete her as a carrier, you've also got the problem that she's basically rapidly approaching being far too small to operate most frontline jet aircraft.
Yeah,
Soviet Union's just generally not interested in that at the time.
Honestly, Seidlitz probably would have been quite recoverable. Yes, she was scuttled, but honestly, it's not that bad.
The problem you've got is that you've also got the Soviet historical what's the word? The Soviet historical, not Nadia, malaise towards aircraft carriers. Even during Stalin's big fleet program, aircraft carriers were never really a serious consideration. And that's not...
No, that's not true. They were. Even before Stalin's big fleet, there was quite a lot of consideration by the Russians.
No. You're missing one word I said there. You're missing a word that was very key and gave context. There was never serious consideration. There was plenty of consideration.
There was?
No. There was plenty of consideration. The Red Fleet wanted them, but in terms of serious political consideration, there was not.
No, there was quite a bit of serious
consideration. If the consideration had been serious, steel would have been cut.
The consideration was serious enough that they commissioned various different of the factories to start making naval aircraft to launch from them.
That's not the same. Testing designs for hypothetical carriers is not the same as actually cutting the steel to build said carriers.
Not just testing, but also production.
I would disagree on that. They didn't
there was literal ideas for using IL-2s for carrier operations.
Yes, I'm aware, but again, this is not the same as seriously considering building a carrier fleet. They were considering the plans to construct a carrier fleet, but in terms of actually serious, let's actually stop thinking about it and start doing it, it never got to that point.
But then I would argue there was basically no serious consideration for most of the Soviet fleet.
You're right. You're exactly right.
When most people agreed there actually was a lot of consideration for a lot of the Soviet fleet. Just because they didn't cut steel does not mean there wasn't serious consideration.
No, there was consideration.
The problem of, oh dear, we've just had our neighbor attack us across the land. Let's deal with that first.
No, there was consideration, and I'm more referring to the post-war Soviet carrier construction programs, not the pre-war. Pre-war, there was very serious consideration towards constructing a carrier fleet. Post-war, that really wasn't the case. Stalin was looking.
Yes, Nessie, you didn't mention that, but you just said.
I did.
You just said there was trying to fix their country.
Yeah, you just said there was never any serious consideration for a Soviet carrier arm.
Yes,
moving on.
I assumed since we were talking about post-war that would be obvious.
No, it's not.
What if Ismail was
because it's a very general statement.
Yes, a general statement in relation to a specific conversation. What if Ismail was completed...
Even for the chatter getting misconstrued, it's like... Anyway.
What if Ismail was completed as a carrier by the Soviet Navy? How would this change history? You'd probably get a fairly middling conversion. You're probably looking at a carrier that's a little bit slow, probably 26, 27 knots. Once you've removed some of these Ismail's armor, not fitted any of its turrets, fitted it with a superstructure and a deck housing. Yeah, you're probably looking at 26, 27 knots. Probably a small air wing. You've basically got the Red Fleet into the carrier game, and at that point, they will probably stay in it. Because one thing that we do notice about the Soviets is that once they have a capability, they like to attempt to retain it. So, for example, when they get their cruiser force post-war, they try to retain large cruising vessels, be that the Sverdlovs, the Krestas, the Slavas, or the Kirovs. They like to retain that capability and expand on it. I think the same thing will be true here. I don't think that... It's probable that she'll likely be sunk during the war, unless she is moved over to the Pacific for safety. As in, and to be fair, to be blunt, you'd probably have her in the Pacific anyway.
Or if she's out at sea at the time, potentially she might survive.
Yeah, but it's more likely that she'd be in the Pacific, because the Soviets would look at their doctrine and go, right, okay, carrier in the Baltic is really not... There's no point having a carrier in the Baltic. You're just saying, please sink me.
It's the same thing with the Black Seas.
Yeah, so it's Northern Fleet or Pacific Fleet is where she'll be, and in either case she'll be safe.
Honestly, having her in the Northern Fleet would be really interesting.
Yeah, that's honestly, I see her actually more likely to be in the Northern Fleet than necessarily Pacific.
The problem you've got
because then she's also with them. She's also then with their most modern destroyers.
She is, but I will point out that the
yes, I agree. She'll probably be sent to Murmansk.
I mean, yeah,
she actually has covering escorts there.
Yes, but in the Pacific she would also have covering escorts, and it's also better for training up a fledgling carrier arm. The Pacific's a much better place to do that, especially in the interwar period. This is why I say that she'll probably alternate. She'll probably cruise. She'll probably cruise in the Pacific in the winter, and then in the Northern Fleet in the summer, basically taking the advantage of the, the fact that the Northern Fleet is not moving during the winter. Because ice, baby.
To be fair, aircraft development for the Soviets would actually be slightly interesting. They have to consider building aircraft for.
I mean,
yes, I do agree. Nautical. The Japanese would not be happy with a Soviet carrier in the Pacific.
They'd probably go, "Oh, it's a single Russian carrier." Honestly, the Japanese reaction would be big whoop, simply because it's a single.
Well, no, as in this would probably be pre-war, not post.
Yeah, it's because it's a
if
single.
The Ismail is being converted, we're talking 1920s.
Yeah, it's a single. Yeah, the reason that here's the thing, they may be the Japanese Navy will make a big fuss over. There's a carrier in the Pacific. Oh, we must accelerate our build program. See Britain and France, see Britain and America. We have to do this because there's a Russian carrier here. We've got to stop the communists. Meanwhile, internally in the IJN, we're not bloody bothered about it. It's a good thing to use politically, but we're not bothered. It's a single carrier with an inexperienced air group and very little in the way of heavy escort.
And
actually, there was potential for them to do so in the interwar period. You've got the Ismail, which is what we're talking about, which was planned to be converted, and there was also a number of other design studies that were seriously considered.
Yeah, they were.
Now, if they're actually finished, is a better question.
Ismail
is the one that was most likely
complete.
Yeah, with the Ismail, you've got a hull that's already built up, is the right hull shape, and is also very, very Tsarist. So that means it's a very, how do I put this? It's a very conventional boiler engine room arrangement. It's very easy for them to work on.
And no, Poseidon, they're not going to build. Japan's not going to build extras because they can't.
No,
treaty exists.
With what also, even if they could, with what slipways.
Yeah, they're going. Like the Japanese are going to make a fuss over it, basically, so that everyone sort of ignores whatever they're doing in China or whatever they're doing with their navy, at whatever point.
If anything, they would probably use it during not Washington. It would be the other one, London. Say, we want this, otherwise we'll walk.
Technically, Japan does have to slip for more carriers by that time.
Yeah,
I thought they're busy with other ships, though.
No, Nagatos are out.
Nagato's out, but they're now working primarily on heavy cruisers. I thought primarily.
The slips for cruisers are not the same slips that the full-size carriers use. So Hiryu.
This depends on what size carrier. This depends on what carrier they're going to be making in the 20s.
Well, if they're if the Japanese are going to be using this as an excuse for anything, they're going to be using this as an excuse for another pair of full-size fleet carriers.
If the treaty doesn't exist, of course.
Well, no. Even if the treaty exists, it's just going to be early. It's just going to be an early version of Hiryu and Soryu.
Well, no, you don't need
No.
the Gatos dockyards to build a Hiryu.
Yeah.
They're 15,000 tons.
Yeah, I know, but like I say, like that will be what it'll be. It'll be a full-size Japanese fleet carrier.
Mm.
In the way that Hiryu and Soryu, Shikaku and Zuikaku are. They're full-size carriers. They're not Rushos. No, they are. They're full. Like, if we consider the Yorktown's full-size carriers, Hiryu and Soryu as full-size carriers.
We have a very different idea on scale, but alright, let's move on.
Yeah.
Like, Hiryu and Soryu are full-size carriers. They just are. They just are. Since the U.S. Navy was well over 1,000 plus ships in World War II, what was stopping them from keeping those numbers in the Cold War? Why did it stop doing
money?
Money. The U.S. Navy was fighting a war on every ocean on the planet.
It's simple as this. The U.S. Navy, before the war ended in 1945, was saying, we can't go on. We can't keep this fleet for that much longer. This has to end soon. Or else we're going to start bankrupting the treasury, which is
or we're gonna have to start downsizing during a war.
Yeah.
Hello, Rudon.
Oh, it's Ruinon.
It is. People don't really talk about it much, but people don't realize how stupidly expensive the U.S. Navy got by the end of the war. That's why the fleet was so immediately mothballed.
Since the U.S. Navy was experimenting with boilers and destroyers in 44 and 45, why didn't they try a big boy boiler on a gearing? Doesn't generate nearly enough steam at nearly enough high pressure. Like, that is a locomotive
Marine
boiler.
boilers and naval boilers, very different.
And also,
very different.
Yeah, you're talking about ships of the late era of steam and steel. Heck, it doesn't matter. Ships of the era of steam generally, there's very little crossover between marine and locomotive boilers. What if the U.S. Navy sold Alaska CB3 to Canada? The Canadians are probably sobbing into a corner, thinking basically going, how are we going to run this, and the carrier, and the rest of the fleet? They don't have the budget.
No, they would choose one or the other.
And it would be the
They
carrier.
have to choose one or the other.
And it would be the
They
carrier.
actually have the capability. They theoretically do have the capability to operate. What would be Hawaii? I don't know what they would name it, but
yeah, but it would. Let's face it. If the choice is a Cattobar light fleet, which gives them decent capability for nearly 20 years, or an Alaska, which doesn't, the choice is obvious.
The light carrier is just fundamentally more flexible and usable in all situations.
Mm-hmm. Prince Oy can get sent to the USN as reparations and is not nuked. Does she get sent to the mothball fleet or parade around by the USN going, look what we got, what a lovely steal?
She gets scrapped.
She gets scrapped.
Gets scrapped.
She's a ship from a fundamentally different era, of very little use in the modern naval world.
It's considering her condition when they got her.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you put answered to a question that's already answered, fleet?
Oh, whoops. I don't know. Let's just leave it. It's fine.
No. We're not leaving it. Like
it's not a problem. Why are you getting?
It's confusing.
What would you name the 1945 Essex class carriers, assuming the president doesn't cancel them? I have a list of what I made for them, and I want to know your input. I am not.
Right.
I am not American. I don't have an opinion.
Okay, is my mic working now?
Yep.
Yeah, go for it.
Yay. Okay. I was busy trying to talk when you were talking about using a big boy boiler on the on a Fletcher, and yeah, that just fundamentally would not work. The pressures are all wrong. I think they only got the big boy up to about 300.
Can we not go back? Can we just focus on where we are? We have a lot to get through today.
All right.
Or you could just, get
Anyway,
through what you can, then go
name for
further.
Essex. They're just going to continue on famous U.S. battles, probably.
Yeah, that's
always has been.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, understandably, they were probably starting to run out if they retained their historical name set. So basically, like, dealing with anything before World War One and a little bit during World War One. But to be fair, you've just fought a war. There's absolutely no reason why you can't start using World War II battle names, which they, to be fair, they already have in World War II as well. So it's like plenty of battles to draw from by that stage. Because there's plenty of light carriers and stuff like that. That's using World War II names already. So yeah, especially when you consider Midway Coral Sea. Yeah.
Next question. Thoughts on the M109 ITV? Do you think it's a tank destroyer with its 80 GMs? Yes. Do you think it's the last tank destroyer the US Army ever had? Yes. Because it was the last vehicle whose primary purpose, almost in this case basically sole purpose, was to engage and destroy enemy armoured vehicles, whose weaponry was set up primarily for that, but basically only for that purpose, given its sole armament was tow missiles. Therefore, and bear in mind, there has not been a vehicle like it in the US arsenal since. There have been lots of vehicles with tow missiles, but there have not been vehicles whose sole job it is to carry tow missiles anymore. Since the US Army goes, oh, we can just strap a tow on everything as a... we just can strap it on things. We don't need a dedicated vehicle to carry the tows. It's not needed. That's about the long and short of it, basically. Why didn't the US adopt the Stingray as the successor to the Sheridan as their light tank? Why did they only sell the Stingray to other countries like Thailand? Basically because the US was falling out with the light tank concept. By the time the Stingray comes around.
I mean,
there's this period between about 1980 and the 2020s where the US sort of falls out of love with the desire for a light tank.
it's less out of love and more the budget doesn't allow it.
Yeah.
Welcome to the 1990s.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's basically it. The US said, okay, what can we afford to not have? Light tanks? Okay, job done.
It's not integral to the air mobility division, so it's like, why? And to be fair, like by the 2000s, when they're like, okay, we actually need some sort of gun in a high mobility or air mobility division, and then they just strap a gun on a striker.
Yeah, and then of course they go, this doesn't quite work, Booker. By the way, Yuki, you'll note that I said specifically it was the last US vehicle that was designed solely to engage tanks. I didn't say nothing else in the US could engage tanks. I said it was the last vehicle in US service, to my knowledge, that was designed solely to engage enemy armor. Like, yes, a M2 Bradley can engage tanks, but that's not its only job. A Abrams can engage tanks, that's not its only job. A Humvee with a tow can engage tanks, but that's not its only job. Like, you'll notice I used very specific language to make my point. And I'll... No, I'm not going to say that.
If I remember correctly, the 901 is mostly deployed into National Guard formation as their native, probably battalion level anti-tank equipment, in essence. So their existence is mostly just to bolster U.S. reserve units with a relatively modern anti-tank equipment.
Yeah, and of course, when they were in frontline service, they were a dedicated anti-armor asset. That was their job.
They're just there to basically stop things from moving forward.
Yeah, they are the last tank destroyers of the U.S.
And we're not saying that the U.S. can't kill tanks, or other things in the U.S. Army can't kill tanks.
Yeah, the specific question was: is it a tank destroyer, and was it the last U.S. tank destroyer? And the answer is yes in both cases.
At least we believe so. I'm currently racking through my brain trying to see if there's any vehicle that comes up with a tank destroyer modicum. I don't think there is.
Next question. Am I stupid to asking myself why not just implement a heat exchanger with seawater? Redundant in the case of clogging on any inlet. I'm not entirely sure what this question is in relation to. I'm not sure if it's in relation to conventional steam or nuclear propulsion. So if whoever asked this question, if you please would ask it again with some context on Monday, I'll be happy to answer it. Could you play Doom on a human brain? Do you think tech priests in Warhammer play Doom on their servitors when they get bored? In regards to playing Doom on a human...
yes.
Yes.
Oh. Okay, there you are. Apparently the answer is yes.
So, yeah, like, there was a recently experiment, well, I say experiment, it was done on, I want to say it was a monkey brain, actually, but, yeah, you can run Doom on organic cells, and also brains. It runs abysmally slow. I think it was calculated something like 1 frame a minute, but it does run.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see.
Moving on.
Next question. If Emperor Hirohito was always going to be Emperor, where does the myth he wanted to be a marine biologist come from?
Wasn't this one answered by Clark?
Yeah, Clark has answered this numerous times, so
I wanted to see if that was in number 68.
And I think he's also done this during some of his brew ships as well. But in regard, my answer to that would be go and look up Dr. Clark's answer to that question, because
which was on here actually.
Yeah, and I don't know.
The answer is, well, I could explain. The answer was because he did want to be a marine biologist. Clark's whole thing was Clark's whole point was he did want to be a marine biologist, but that's because he didn't expect to be emperor quite as quickly as he was. Like it's the same thing with our royal family as well. Even when you're in line to it, you still have your own opportunity to go and do stuff, and he wanted to basically do a bit of marine biology before he might have became emperor. Is basically the long and short of from what I remember from Clark's statement.
Still human.
Question. How broke is fleet? I am not going to answer that one. That's a bit close to my personal.
It was a joke question, Dragon. Come on.
It was, but I did do it. I did make sure to grab any and all questions.
All right.
If Britain builds the proposed Tiger Codes by Dr. Clark, what would other nations build in response?
We already answered that.
Yeah. Why was the Royal Navy the only navy that decided heavy cruisers are not worth it? The US went on to proceed to build the Baltimores alongside with the Clevelands. Would it not have been better to just build more Clevelands instead? The difference was the US could afford the luxury of having 8-inch cruisers as well. And by that I mean afford in terms of build capacity, not cost. The Japanese had to go with only heavies because they needed heavies to counter everyone else's heavies, and couldn't really afford to build modern light cruisers. The British needed modern cruisers generally, and decided on large 6-inch cruisers that could do everything pretty much well, rather than smaller numbers of 8-inch cruisers. And also, that's the long and short of it, the US could afford to do both. The US could afford to have modern 6-inch cruisers and modern 8-inch cruisers. So that's the long and short of it, basically. Will Fleet do a playthrough of the Hearts of Iron board game? Probably not. I don't know how I would do board game content on the channel, and I don't know why I'd play the board game when I have the actual game to play.
Just see what the difference is.
Yeah. Would the Shipshape crew do a campaign for North Africa game? Probably not. That game is insanely complex, and I have enough trouble getting the Shipshape crew together for anything normally. Trying to get them together for a campaign for North Africa would be impossible. What if the panel collaborated and did a Rule the Waves 3 game? Argue over doctrine and ship designs and fleet management. I would be down to do a Succession game with certain YouTubers. I know for a fact I've got some I could do a Rule the Waves Succession game with. One of the most popular series on my channel was the short-lived Ultimate Admiral Dreadnought Succession game I did with Brother Ruinon and Rex's Hangar. But I am considering possibly doing a Rule the Waves 3 game, or having a Rule the Waves 3 playthrough where I have a sort of panel behind me, sort of second-guessing me, and giving me orders over my head. If the FREM is getting the MLUs already, then will the Constellation class already be outdated by the time it enters operational service? I am not entirely sure what this means. I know what the FREM is, but I have no idea what the
We'll need
MLUs are.
cyclic for this one.
Yes,
We'll need
that is
cyclic for
a
this
cyclic question. So I would say ask that again when cyclic is here, or ask it again on Monday if cyclic is here. So now that's all of 67's questions done. On to 68. So this is a question specifically for Dr. Clark, and Dr. Clark isn't here, but Dr. Clark, what impact would Tiger Cubs have on subsequent torpedo, no torpedo tubes, decisions of subsequent cruisers, especially the U.S.? No impact, as far as I'm concerned. Whether just because you've got a bunch of larger cruisers running around doesn't change various nations' calculus towards torpedoes on their more traditional fleet cruisers.
Well, that's the thing. Clark pretty much said there's not going to be your traditional 8-inch fleet cruisers if those things exist.
No, I didn't say 8-inch fleet cruisers. I just said fleet cruisers generally, because you've got the large cruisers, but you'll still have 8 to 10,000 ton 6-inch cruisers running around.
Yes.
And the calculus for whether or not they will have torpedo tubes will not be affected in any major way by the existence of large cruisers. What was the reason the US didn't send Abrams to Afghanistan during the Great War on Terror, while other Allied countries sent Leopard 2s and other armor there? I couldn't tell you. Off the top of my head.
We could guess. The Abrams most likely would be much more expensive to maintain and operate in such a low-intensity conflict, while the other nations don't generally have any other choice. If they want to send some big guns, it's going to have to be a Leopard. The US has a choice, and their choice is strap big gun on striker.
Discord, when on earth is QE and Renown getting refits? Context, Nelrod in 38. I don't understand what the heck that question means.
You remember when went through the Nelrod appearing in 1938?
Oh yeah, the 6 Nelrods with when on earth is QE and Renown getting refits? Well, they're already in. If it's 38, QE and Renown are already in. They're in the process of having their refits. They're in the yards. It's happening.
So yeah,
I'm gonna have an annoyed Foxel in a bit.
what did she do?
More something else her family's done. It'll be amusing.
What if they give missile crisis in 1962, but it's the UK against the USSR when the USSR made a move against the British territory? Would Britain back down or handle the situation better than the USRL? Well, first of all, that wouldn't be equivalent to the Cuban Missile Crisis. That would be a conventional escalation.
Yeah, that's a territory dispute.
Yeah, and more to the point, that is something that.
The closest thing you can Cuban Missile Crisis might be if they started arming Ireland with nuclear missiles.
But I would also
But that's
point
not
out.
happening.
Yeah, but I would also point out, says move against the British territory, will Britain back down or handle the situation much better than the US? That implies the US didn't handle the Cuban Missile Crisis in a fantastic manner that balanced escalation with keeping the world away from conflict, which is exactly what happened. The US handled the Cuban Missile Crisis spectacularly. It's almost impossible for it to have gone better. They avoided having the need to invade Cuba. They avoided Cuba getting medium-range ballistic missiles. All they had to give up for it was removing missiles they were already going to remove from Turkey anyway. So the US won the Cuban Missile Crisis in spectacular fashion.
I don't remember what the Royal Navy's like in 62, but honestly, I'm pretty sure it's not a bad fleet at the time.
Not a bad fleet, but it's not that happy trying to fight a red fleet by itself.
It's 62. It has enough grunt strength in terms of
because you've got the county classes have entered service at this point.
You've still got some of the older 6-inch cruisers. You've still got both Tiger. You've got all 3 Tigers. You've still got a decent caliber carrier force. You've still
The
got
Darings are still all in force.
yeah. This is actually a
Vanguard, I think, is only 2 years out of service.
hang on, let me have a check.
If I'm remembering correctly.
I
I
think
want to say she was. Wasn't she taken? Yeah, decommissioned June 7th, 1960.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Yeah, broke up for scrap beginning in 1967.
yeah. The problem you've got is
So
that,
she's out, but still.
yeah. There's not going to be a way to bring her back. Sadly, especially not for a flare-up crisis like this.
Well, this would have been 2 years. This would have been 2 years into her scrapping, so she's done for. But either way,
Yeah.
the Royal Navy in 62's quite reasonably capable of taking on a Soviet type.
There's no reason why, like if it's, I think is if they've made a move against British territory, then thing is the UK's basically they're gonna have to make the argument, well, why are we not declaring Article 5? Like, thing is, the Soviets aren't gonna make a move against British territory. The whole problem the whole problem you've got
Fun
here.
times. Sorry, I've just realised this would give Blackburn Buccaneers in service a bit of fun.
The problem you've got with this scenario is that it makes some fundamental misunderstandings about how the Cold War was jockeyed by both sides. The USSR would never make a move against sovereign territory of of a nation even remotely associated with NATO, for fear of Article 5. The only way I can see this happening is if the Russians put atomic weapons somewhere. I can't think of a flashpoint. I cannot think of a flashpoint that
Faroe
would-
Islands?
Again, that would require them to have taken the Faroe Islands, which would result in them having to attack Norway, which would mean Article 5.
Denmark, you mean? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
Either way, it's Article 5 either way.
The Irish nukes.
Yeah, that was my comment earlier. If they maybe gave Ireland
That is-
nukes,
Yeah, that's like the closest thing to an actual.
honestly, because Ireland is the only one who might accept.
But even then, the Irish were always, during the Cold War, aligned with the NATO powers, even if they weren't an active part of, and still aren't an active part of the alliance structure.
I don't know if with certain powers in Ireland, especially in the 60s, if they were offered nukes to potentially use against the British, they would take it.
The thing is that Dragon,
You forget just how
No, they would take
horrific
it.
Irish
That's
history
the
was.
point.
yes, but
like
no,
the whole point
there's
with what would end up
there's a
happening.
difference between the Irish Republican
let
Army
me
and the
finish this
governments of the time.
Let me finish a sec. What would likely end up happening is then there would be basically the nations would have to start talking of what do you mean you're arming this group of the Irish separatists now, because it would probably evolve into two different camps yet again. Of then the Soviets backing one point and then everyone else having to go, well, no, okay, either Ireland you deal with this yourself or we will have to potentially step in because we are not allowing nukes in Ireland.
I mean, that's basically pretty much how the Cuban Missile Crisis went.
Yeah.
So
it's basically
We'll continue
you either
trying to
step
ship the
down
people and the
and
Royal
if
Navy
basically
will
have a
fly
blockade in place
stuff.
of if Russia tries to send anything, the Navy's here. You are not allowed past this line.
That's the only way you could get a Cuban Missile Crisis in the
It's
period
awkward.
And
it's
and
not
it would,
great.
and it would
Hey,
likely
Russians
go.
might get.
Yeah, and it would likely go the same way. The Russians would not be willing to, like they weren't historically. Because bear in mind, neither side wants a conflict. They want to jockey for position, but neither side is willing to cross that final red line. Throughout the entire Cold War, neither side, like both sides are convinced the other is going to attack first. Neither wants, but neither side actually wants to attack first. This is the weird thing of the Cold War. Neither side wants to pull the trigger first, but both are convinced the other will, if they sense weakness.
Like, if you're referring to the question that Nautical, basically, the only way we could even see it come remotely close would be due to the various different separatist parties in Ireland in 1962, which, keep in mind, Ireland is still very much divided in the 60s. the only way that would come even remotely close is basically if one of these parties was starting to be backed by the Soviets, and the Soviets went, for whatever stupid reason, basically went, fine then, if things keep escalating, we'll arm you with nukes. And everyone else sort of turning and looking at you, what, mate?
Including some of the other Irish parties.
The Irish are probably going, excuse her? Well then, nope. That ain't happening.
Yep, pretty much.
Giving Indonesia nukes?
No,
No,
that
because then Indonesia might use them against Russia.
yeah, and
Indonesia's no one's friend.
I would also point out that like the Russians were never giving anybody nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
They were Russian nukes under Russian control, both Russian officers and men, placed in allies to protect them.
Wouldn't that be New Delhi's problem at that point?
Because
to a degree.
because to be blunt, there's a reason why the Russians go to such effort to remove the nuclear jet-powered cruise missiles from Cuba in the aftermath of the Cuban Missile Crisis, because they do not want Castro anywhere near them. Anyway, what is the future USMBT going to look like? Is it the Abrams X, the next USMBT, or is it just a stopgap solution until they design a whole new chassis with new technology instead? To be completely and utterly blunt, this question is one of those things, it sounds like you could have a complex discussion on it, but in reality, and to make a long story short, we don't know. We genuinely do not know.
So it's very simple. Chieftain has a video on this. Abrams 6 is a technology demonstrator. The next generation of USMBT is the M1E3, which will be the A3 whenever they finish the damn thing. So no, Abrams 6 is not going to be used. It's just a technology demonstrator
It's
to see
like
what you
the
could
South
put
African
in a
one,
tank.
the TTD, Tank
Yes.
Technology Demonstrator.
Yes.
There's just proof of concept.
The M1E3 is what they're currently working on, and it's not a new chassis, it's still an Abrams chassis, but they are redesigning the turret so that everything is integrated instead of attached on so that it doesn't weigh 80 tons. That is the primary focus of the USMBT, is lessening weight while maintaining technology.
What are your thoughts on the Fido-acoustic torpedo and the Mark 27 torpedo? Do you think the US is the only allied nation that designed and produced acoustic homing torpedoes? They're the only allied nation that fielded them during the conflict. Of course, the immediate proliferation of such weapons in the aftermath of the conflict by various allied nations proves that all of the powers were working on them. It's just that only the US actually got to the, yes, we can shoot people with them during the Second World War.
Well,
No,
Allied.
British is
there
actually
was
quite interesting.
Allied. I said
I
allied.
was going to say,
I know the Germans had some, but we're talking about the Allies here.
and also, I'm
it's
pretty
actually-
sure there was a British one as well that was in the works.
No. No, the British, when it comes to it, they started developing one and then sort of stopped when they figured out, they are really, really easy to make useless.
Yeah.
And that's why you get the British going, in the 60s, oh shit, we're still using
Non-acoustic,
gunfire
non-homing.
torpedoes.
Yeah. Yeah. This is so
because
okay.
the British maxed out the defences against them,
Yeah.
and so never really saw the use in them.
Until they realised, oh wait, we can use submarines to kill all the submarines.
Yeah, that's why the British
Uh,
work on the wire-guided torpedo.
Yeah, because they do. After post-war, you do get one British acoustic torpedo, but they're not to be used by ships. They're dropped by Shackletons and Nimrods.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's about right.
That sounds about right, to be fair. Right, so, thoughts on the US moving on from tracked self-propelled howitzers to wheeled self-propelled howitzers? Does the cancellation of the tracked ERCA reduce the capability of the field artillery for the US? No. No, not at all. It's not surprising that a lot of that the US is moving to wheeled self-propelled artillery. They're following the trend that the rest of the world seems to be following for self-propelled guns. With the powertrain of modern trucks, and especially military trucks, you get far more mobility, a far easier to maintain platform, and far better shoot and scoot capability from a wheeled chassis than you ever could from
Are you
a
really
tracked chassis.
wanting your arty to shoot and shoot, though?
Yes,
Yes,
That's not
it's against
really the
counterparry.
goal.
But
yes,
Fleet,
yeah,
I'd just like to point
yeah,
out that the Americans are the only ones that are really doing it.
the French,
Because the
Koreans.
Koreans, yeah, but the French are fucking
Nuts.
the French.
no,
But
there's
because you've
been a-
got the
That's
Norwegians.
not a good answer.
No, there's been
Yeah.
a trend
Yeah,
towards
but-
wheeled
but-
self-propelled guns across the
Has it
world.
though? Because Norway's is bringing out more Vidars.
Uh,
The Germans have the new generation of Panzer Haubitzens, which are still tracked.
yeah,
the
I'm-
A lot of
Koreans
nations are
yeah,
still sticking with
no,
tracks.
but
Still
yes.
sticking with tracks for the next
those-
generation.
yeah,
We're still sticking with tracks for the replacement for the AS-90.
but yes, but like I said, it's a trend. It's not a wave.
Well,
This is
I'm trying to
the
figure out
thing.
where the trend
Where's
is.
the trend?
Well, that's the thing.
what
It
that's-
depends on what the Army's operation requirement is.
Yeah,
If
this
the
is
U.S.
the thing.
deemed it that the track is no longer worth it, then that's what they do.
Yeah,
Or
like,
this could
like-
just be a side tangent with them, and they might go back to tracks
it's
later.
it's
Things
unlikely.
have happened.
The advantages of wheels are becoming more and more apparent.
Not
alright.
necessarily.
You get roughly
like-
similar cross-country performance from wheel
You
chassis.
don't.
nowadays. You
Oh,
really don't.
hopefully.
you do not.
Please,
No.
as someone
You
with a
claim
H-
proof
as,
that you do not.
as someone with a HGV license, a HGV
Do not act. Do not.
with wheels.
Do not sit there and compare a HGV
Really?
to a military truck.
They-
Fleet, that's
Fleet,
what a
they
lot of them
are
are.
HG.
They're based off HGV chassis.
Yeah, but it's like calling.
Also,
It's
No,
not
Fleet-
right, Fleet, when they've got the same powertrain, the same gearbox, the same engine, and the same chassis. The big difference is what they put on the back of it when they
That's-
put on the bed.
That is not any military truck extant today. Well, apart from some of the Russian ones.
It is. No, it is.
Are you really going to sit there and
Fleet,
tell me the
oh,
US?
a lot of the British fleet
Yeah,
that are
that's,
based off.
yeah, but
Yeah,
that's
the German anti-air trucks. I can't remember what it's called now. They're based off Mercedes HEVs.
also, even going beyond just that, no, even with the improvements of wheels, tracks are still far
Tracks are still better.
superior in cross-country performance. Primarily depending on terrain. Because if your cross-country performance is, yes, it's, mostly hard land with not many bumps, then yes, wheels will be better. But if it's, yes, this is a big field where it's been raining for the past 3 weeks,
Knight. The US
Okay.
this
Knight.
is basically a bog.
Knight. The US military-industrial complex is not corrupt.
It is.
It's
It
not. It's like it's
So, okay.
It depends on what you
fundamentally,
it
you
depends
have
on what
to
you class as
guys,
corruption, but
guys. You have to think about what the U.S. is building its forces for.
Mhm.
Their primary target nowadays is a Pacific Island war against China.
Yeah.
A
And for
truck
fighting
chassis
Japan and
is
Taiwan.
a truck chassis is going to be much easier to transport and utilize in some random shitty Pacific island than a track self-propelled howitzer.
I mean, we're seeing
Taiwan
yeah,
Taiwan has the infrastructure to handle wheel. Japan has the infrastructure to handle wheel. You don't really need tracks for what the U.S. is planning
I
to
mean,
do.
I would agree with you all, were it not for the
You
fact
do.
that the Ukrainians are getting far better use out of their wheeled artillery systems than they are out of their
They're not, though.
They are. They say their wheeled systems are far more responsive and better able to fire, shoot, maneuver, fire again compared to tracked.
on solid land.
No, they
Yeah.
say no. Generally, they're saying generally, not just on
I
solid
don't
land.
the
think
statement
they,
was made
but-
after the mud season.
Yes.
Yeah,
But it's also a case of when it comes to the Americans have a large reserve of tracked artillery pieces.
Yeah, plenty of 109s.
And
to
it's
be
a
fair,
case of they don't need more 109s. They have a very niche application, which is what truck-based artillery is good for. So it's very good at moving down stuff like highways efficiently and quickly.
I think what you were
No.
talking about, Foxo, was the Flakaradarad.
Night.
Yes. So
Night.
it's the case of it's a niche. It's a
Night.
niche application for a niche circumstance
Aha!
that the US
Waffen
hasn't
System
had.
Roland auf LKW 15-ton Flakaradarad.
Knight,
Yes.
Knight, the saying
And
the
yes, I know I butchered that. I apologize to any German people, but still.
Knight,
Like-
Knight, saying the U.S. Saying the U.S. military-industrial complex is corrupt is as a gacha is like saying
Right.
the sky is blue. Every military-industrial complex is riddled with corruption, from Britain to the United States to France to Germany to Russia to China. They're all riddled with corruption and under-the-counter payments. The U.S. isn't a special. Oh, look how corrupt they are.
But they're often seen as the more corrupt one.
Yes, because it's
Which
because
is-
it's a lot more
because
obvious.
It's mass. It's just mass.
It's just the
Yeah,
mass,
and
yeah.
of
Yeah.
course, and you
The
know,
US is
and of course,
really
you know,
huge, and
nudging,
also it's
nudging
very
by
obvious in media.
pro Russian propaganda channels. Look how corrupt the US is.
No,
It-
it,
it-
they're
it-
not
it-
like-
it's not
no,
with that. It's
no, please.
it's stuff like this. Right. Here's
If you're
an obvious
considering
example.
BBC
The
pro-Russian
fucking
examples,
Starfighter.
yeah.
If you look at stuff like the Starfighter, what came out about that? It's a case of the military-industrial complex, no matter who runs it, will always be corrupt. Because
Yeah, I'd agree.
fundamentally, it's a
It's
very
just a
opaque
complex.
business where everything's done behind closed doors, and realistically, nobody expects returns.
So Runon raised a good point for the whole track versus wield. Wield are pretty good for defensive operations,
Actually, no,
which
that
is
is
where
a,
you might have to very quickly move.
that is
But
a very
for
good
an
point.
actual offensive operation, tracked is superior.
Now, also
Um,
fundamentally
Dra-
speaking,
I would
we
also-
also have to. We also
I would
have
also
to
say
look
just
at
brain again,
what
but
the wheeled artillery is supposed to replace. Are they supposed to replace the paladins, or is the U.S. trying to get rid of their tow artilleries? Because the
Possibly.
Ukraine has pretty much.
what's the
proved
new one that
that
the US
as
are currently
well.
bringing out then?
What I
I don't
would
actually know what it is called.
Yeah, that I
no.
don't know either.
Dragon, I would like to just quickly touch
Yeah,
on
but
something you said.
as-
You said that shooting and scooting is not something that you want in your artillery earlier. That's not. That's
That's absolutely
not
something you
ne-
want to do now, as Ukraine has proven.
yeah. You can't sit static
In a defensive operation to a degree, yes.
No, but even in a
Because then you
No,
are exposed to
even-
counter battery.
no, even in a defensive action, you just can't sit still on a peer conflict as an artillery.
What are you
base.
saying, that if you're in the offense, you won't get counter batteried?
Theoretically speaking, if you're in an offense, you shouldn't be dealing with them slightly better, and you've probably also got more aerial assets above.
No,
No.
the Ukrainian
no,
war was
yeah,
proven.
no.
The Ukrainian war
Yeah,
was
but
proven.
Ukraine's a really bad example.
Yeah,
No,
because
that's
you're
no.
looking at an air neutral combat theater
I would also
where
point out
neither
what happens
survivor
if it's not air neutral?
you still move anyway. It's good practice.
It's not an air
Then- yeah,
neutral at
but-
all.
I wouldn't say
Right,
it's
I
on
mean,
Ukraine's
it's-
favour either. Though.
It's not.
It's more if
let's be
anyone's
real,
favour, it's more
neither
on
air
Russia.
force is doing large scale airstrikes. Neither one's
Uh,
got its
I would
got
say
its
it's
air
more air
force.
The
limit.
Russian
extra
Air Force
artillery.
definitely still has the operational advantage. It can still conduct strikes.
Yes,
Well,
they
the
do. I
Yeah,
Ukrainian
agree.
but it's
Air Force,
actively
not.
suppressed.
We're
not
but
Talking
that's-
like
Yeah, but that's how Battlefield works. You have
Yeah,
to suppress the other
it's-
Air Force.
yeah, it's air neutral because one side doesn't have air superiority.
I'd argue that the Russians do have air. They do have air.
They don't.
No, they have air supremacy because, well, they
They don't.
No, they don't have air supremacy. Air supremacy means that they could fly all over Ukraine without any worry. That's not the situation.
Oh no, sorry. Air superiority is where they have dominance over the air and can dictate certain parts of it. But air supremacy is when they just have total. Yeah, I'm thinking of air advantage. That's what I'm thinking of.
I'm still not finding what new US vehicle you're referring to. By the way,
Yeah,
for the
I
howitzer.
don't know what he's talking about.
Like
think
from what I
it's-
can find, I can't find anything on a new wheel.
I remember seeing a
Yeah.
video of like some weird ass howitzer attachment on like some US trucks or something like that. But fundamentally speaking, from what I understand, is that the US is just looking for a way to get rid of their tow artillery because that's just not responsive enough anymore.
No, it really isn't. It really isn't.
It's more of a case of the tow guns were really fucking useful in Afghanistan, with where there wasn't infrastructure just
Yeah.
to support mechanized guns.
I mean, Russia. I mean, the
But
Russia-Ukrainian war has
it's just-
shown that towed guns are just.
Yeah,
Well, we
but-
all knew that
yeah,
already.
but we're talking about America here,
That doesn't mean you can't just
and the
ignore the
Russia-Ukraine
lessons.
was not particularly relevant to America.
It
It is.
is.
What
It's
are
not.
you
It is
talking
not,
about?
because right, let's be real. US doctrine is based around air superiority and air support, and the air being the primary way of dealing with threats.
Yes.
And you've got to remember the Russians are fighting not to the most degree under Soviet battle doctrine.
Yeah. The
And so is and so are the Ukrainians. It's been one of the big issues with the Bradleys and all the support that's been sent is they're not being used particularly well because they weren't designed for the doctrine the Ukrainians are using them.
I mean, the
Ukrainians are using them for.
I mean, there was the only case I can think of the Ukrainians using their Western assets badly was that horribly botched offensive they did. Apart from that, they've been getting pretty good use out of them.
Yeah, that's because they're actively changing the doctrine around them and trying to figure out how to use them properly. Because a lot of those senior officers are all Soviet Academy trained.
Well, yeah, that's not really surprising.
And the fact is, for people wanting to fight, people that are going to fight a war in the American way, where your entire military thinking revolves around air superiority, having air superiority.
It's not.
And-
It's not just air superiority now. The entire issue with the U.S. right now, learning Ukrainian war, is the usage of FEVs and how it will affect
Yeah.
them. It's just
Yeah.
the fact that even in a air supremacy situation, an FPV drone is too small for the U.S. Air Force to deal with.
Yeah.
And that's something that
Which-
the U.S. Army is
Which-
going to have to figure out how to deal with, and the artillery is primarily something that is 100% being affected by the deployment of drones right now.
And I will point out
It
also
is
that the US is
so
Yeah,
much.
but-
the US needs to look at the Ukrainian war because you're talking about being air neutral. I'm sorry to break it to you, but the US may be looking at a war with China that they can't guarantee on always having air superiority. They need to actually seriously think about, okay, how do we fight, or how are these two nations fighting in an environment that isn't total air dominance for us? And they need to be looking at that, because I'm sorry, but the PLAAF is
in
becoming
the
a peer.
campaigns, but in the theater that the Americans are preparing to fight in, if you've lost air superiority, you've lost the war.
That's not.
Like, we have to be careful not to overlearn the lessons of this war.
I am aware of that, but I am also saying that I think we also have to be careful to not discount it because the US is strong with American air power, always strong.
To be fair, the U.S. Army is still actively watching and learning from what the Ukrainians are doing.
Yeah, but if you go by what I think it's the War Institute and the other big one that's based out of, where is it? You'll find that a lot of what the Americans are claiming they're looking at and trying to start getting input off the Ukrainians for is stuff like unit level tactics for dealing with drones and FPVs, the need for stuff like SHORAD.
Mm-hmm.
Sort
Dragon.
of these large scale offensive maneuvers without air superiority isn't what they're looking at.
That isn't what we're talking about.
Yeah, but that's sort of the lesson of the Ukrainian war are about a nation fighting a much superior air power in an air neutral environment. Anyway, next question.
Thoughts on the Masterchef M4? Do you think it's a better strategic bomber than the B-47? Oh no, sorry, this one's that's already answered. We already did that one. What if instead of deciding to... Yeah, apparently we must have answered it last week.
Who keeps... No?
Yeah, apparently we did. It says it right here, answered. Uh,
You keep
what if
something answered.
what if instead of deciding to convert a Margi and a Kargi into carriers, the Argent instead chosen to convert the Keys, whose keels had just been laid out by the time of the Washington Naval Treaty? Would it be possible? And if so, would they have more capabilities than the Kargi and Karga? Well, first of all, there's going to be a lot of people inside the Japanese government going, why in the name of all that is holy are you deciding to convert, basically build from scratch 2 new carriers at insane hikes in cost, rather than using the 2 battle cruisers that would be far easier to convert and take less time and money? Secondly, it would be possible, but like I say, it would be a lot more costly and take a lot more time. And would they have more capabilities than a Kargi and Karga, given you're basically, at this point, designing a keel-up carrier? Yes, they would absolutely have more capabilities than a Kargi and Karga.
So, primary thing I need to ask: Did the treaty write down exactly which hull you're allowed to convert?
Yes, they did. They the British were offered options on the, like, each nation was basically offered options.
And that should be the number one answer as to why you can't just go and say, let's convert the Keys instead.
Yeah, like for example, the Japanese had to
There
go.
is physically no way the other 2 countries is going to be like, yeah, sure, we could totally let you build a completely brand new, from the keel up carrier.
Mm-hmm.
You can. That could happen. Because by that stage, the Americans and the British are going to be like, no.
Yeah.
If that's the case, we get to build ours out of the G3 hulls, and the Americans are still stuck with the Lexingtons unless they want to convert a South Dakota hull, which would be funny.
Yeah, that would be funny, but very, very silly.
Yes.
It's fucking the wide Putin meme carrier.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Have I missed? I feel like I'm getting a.
I'm fairly sure we didn't answer the 2 questions above that one, but whatever.
I have answered on them. Thoughts on the Battle of Palmdale and the failed attempt at shooting down the drone Hellcat? Do you think the US over-reliance on technology in shooting down the drones caused them to fail in this shoot down? Also, would other air forces like the RAF or the Soviet Air Force do better in terms of this shoot down? So the Battle of Palmdale takes place in 1956. They were trying to shoot down an F-6F Hellcat, and they were testing surface-to-air and air-to-air missiles. So what I would yeah. So what I would say, it's a test. They are using a aircraft of a type that is actually of a radically different profile to the sort of aircraft these missiles would be expected to actually engage,
Namely smaller.
and with much more easy to detect heat signatures. So a very hot tailpipe with a jet engine inside it, rather than a piston engine at the front hidden by the rest of the aircraft.
Yes. Fleet knows it's a drone. We got it. Moving on.
Yeah, basically, it was a series of unfortunate circumstances. It wasn't really anything indicative with flaws in US doctrine or the weapon systems they were trying to use. It was just they actually tried to shoot missiles designed and configured around targeting the very hot signatures of early jets against a early piston-engine aircraft that didn't generate enough heat, really, for the somewhat primitive heat signature sensors of some of the missiles to actually engage.
Fundamentally speaking, it's a weapon test. Weapon failed.
And of course,
Yeah, it's a case of you're not looking at first gen IR missiles here. You're looking at sort of the prototypes.
I mean, yes, it's funny when the Air National Guard tried to intercept the drone and completely missed, setting
Yeah,
a hillside on fire.
Oh yeah, like but
But
that is basically pilot skill.
so yeah, there's nothing much to it other than it's a failed weapon test. If the British or the Soviet did this and their weapon failed, I mean, yeah, sure, okay, their weapon failed. Maybe they might have slightly better time making sure the drone doesn't
Yeah, Knight,
wander off course and intercept it. But
Knight. The rockets are
I
fired
mean,
by the Air
okay,
National
okay,
Guard
right.
that go
So
to
it's a-
intercept them.
So yeah, that there was a bunch of tests around the Sea Vixen and Red Top, and that struggled especially at low altitude, to shoot down bona fide mosquitoes. And we're talking this takes place at 5 or 6 years after.
Like,
Need to go for a little bit, so I'll be back.
fair enough. Why did the USS Saratoga operate alongside the Fast Carrier Task Force more often from late 1943 onwards? She has the deck space to operate 1944-45 US Carrier aircraft, and also was speedy enough to keep up with and sail with the Essex class carriers. Tell you the God's honest truth, I've no idea.
I do.
Go on.
So Saratoga was pretty much relatively long in the tooth. She went into refit in early 44, and then she was selected as the training carrier for the first wave of U.S. night fighters, U.S. carrier night fighters, which is and it's basically the squadron that went on Enterprise after they're done.
Hey!
That's why Saratoga was not a part of Fast Carrier Task Force, because she was in refit, and after refit she was there to train the night fighting squadrons. And it's not like there isn't enough Essex around to, have them run off and do the high intensity stuff, because, they're brand new and stuff like that. Saratoga could absolutely stick with the Fast Carrier Task Force, like you said. She is more than capable of doing so. She just has other callings from the U.S. Navy. So yeah.
So that's answered. Thoughts on the Blue Ridge class command ship? Do you think it has better electronic communication and suites and command and control ability for commanders and flag admirals than on cruisers and carriers? Let me just check quickly what this is. If it's a it's a modern ship, so therefore we can't answer that question because, to be blunt, whatever specs it has are classified, and we can only guess.
Well,
to be blunt,
1970, so
it's still around though.
Yeah.
And therefore will have been upgraded to maintain its effectiveness in the role it currently serves. So, to be blunt, like I say, when you're talking about the specifications of modern warships in terms of things like communication, command, and control, you're basically you can't answer it.
For all we know, it's a floating hotel.
Yeah.
Move on.
How did the USN cope with the mixed jet and propeller piston engine aircraft driven on their aircraft carriers post-war Korean War in late 50s? Did they have problems with different engine types started spotting aircraft? Since the ratio of propeller jet aircraft is almost 50-50, unlike the 60s until today, where most of them are jet or turboprop driven aircraft, it honestly caused no problem at all. No, there was no problem. It was just they were in transition. Both types used very similar fuel. Startup was a little bit different, but it wasn't anything that couldn't be worked around. It was just you've brought new aircraft onto the carrier. The fact they have a different engine system really didn't matter. A piston-engined aircraft with a nose wheel can use a catapult just like a jet aircraft can. Like, there wasn't an issue at all. It didn't fundamentally change anything.
It's a problem the USN expected and pretty much sorted out in the operational level. The crew could deal with it, because it's just, the power plant's different, but operationally it's the plane. The mechanics are probably like tearing their hair out trying to read out all the different aircraft manuals to maintain them, but that's basically the same as getting new jets or anything.
What if instead of building the Yamatos, the Arjana decide to build pairs of modern fast battleships that they can build with their current dockyards?
Ooh.
What can they more with the extra resources from not building the 18-inch Yamatos? If the Japanese Navy decides to do that, they're giving up on fighting the Allies. They have given up on trying to fight the Americans and the British. The whole point of the Yamatos is to enable them to fight the numerically superior Western powers. That's the whole point of going for the Yamatos. Building modern fast battleships does is it gives you equivalence. Yamato can be expected to just about tangle with 2 US fast battleships and easily tangle with a pair of standards. A normal Japanese fast battleship with 9 16-inch guns is not going to be able to do that. It will have to go one-on-one with an American fast battleship.
No, Knight. Building more than 2 is irrelevant. The entire point is the fact that Japan does not have the dry dock or the ways to build enough to match the Western Allies, and 2, they don't have to. You could build something not as big as Yamato, but that's not going to net you 2 more battleships.
Yeah, this is the thing.
So,
The slips that the Yamatos were using were the battleship slips. They had to be expanded to fit the Yamatos, but at the end of the day, they were still the battleship slips.
Yeah. Remember that just because you're building it slightly smaller doesn't mean you've not got to build 2 sets of armor, 2 more sets of armor belts, 2 more sets of turrets, 2 more sets of turbines.
and you have to build them after the first 2 comes out. So the
Knight.
time scale wise is still the same.
Knight, I'm aware that the US would be fighting the Yamatos with more than just 2 ships to 1. It was an example of what a Yamato could realistically do, rather than
Yes,
exactly what would happen.
As Renan said, the model is really more of a deterrent than an actual, come and face me, bitch, sort of thing.
And they were there to give
It is
overmatch
just
in a
the
potential
porcupine.
final engagement as well. Like, if it had come to that, they were there to give the overmatch for the final engagement.
Like Dr. Clark has said multiple times, the entire doctrine of the IJN is to attrit the enemy navy while they're coming over. The point is that when they get to you, their fleet is in the condition where the Japanese battle line could actually divide and chew up.
Yep. And the Yamatos are ideal for that. Are they perfect ships? No. In regards to what Wellesley's saying on Discord, they could build ships the same size as the Yamato, but faster with 16-inch guns. At that point, you're still building a large battleship then. You have to go through the same work to build the slips. And at that point, honestly, build the Yamatos. You don't need 30 knot fast capital ships. Very few people in the world actually have them.
I think actually Meta put this best a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
The Yamatos are the perfect ships for the previous naval war.
But of course, I will point out that that none of the navies involved have, well, what's the word? What the hell is?
And Japan's suffering from a minor case of
How do we fight?
naval war works like it does in World War One. How do we fight
Well,
World War
it's
One
less
style
World War
engagements
One.
with what we want?
And I will
It's
also
less
point out
World
that
War One.
Japan
They're
wasn't
trying to.
like
Their
Japan's also
entire doctrine is just based around on how do we get another Tsushima.
like how
Yeah.
do we set the conditions for a decisive battle to enable us to actually win a war with the Western powers? Because remember, despite the fact that there's a meme about it, the decisive battle was not the end point. That's the okay. So we've crushed the Western navies to a point where we are actually now numerically superior. As I said, there were actually
Now-
2 other slipways they could have used to build more Yamatos, but they didn't have the people to build more battleships. But also, let's point out that the Japanese were also hedging. they had the Yamatos for the old traditional style of warfare, but they also had the Kirabutai in case the carrier was the dominant fighting force. The Japanese had both their bases covered.
The Kirabutai is more. The Kirabutai is part of the attrition part of the war.
Oh, it is, but the point
They're
is
supposed
that
to trick the enemy fleet.
yes, they can do, but the Japanese were very quick to realize once the Pacific War kicked off that the striking power had shifted from the battle fleet to the carriers.
Yeah, but technically
Because
so in the U.S. That's just learning from what's currently happening.
Yeah, but
It's not that they prepared the Kirabutai for this.
to a degree, it's also a case of the Japanese got a front row seat, literally front row seat, to things like Taranto.
yep.
And it's a case of the Royal Navy was functionally using their carriers as its strike arm.
Mm-hmm. I mean, for example, when you actually get the decisive battle of the Japanese want, and they call it this themselves, what they call the Battle of the Philippine Sea, is that if they call it the decisive battle, it's the carriers that are taking the lead in that.
Yeah, because by 43 they very much understand carrier aviation is,
Philippine Sea was 44.
or 44. Sorry, it's the primary strike. It's the one that it's the thing that brings the most hurt.
Poseidon. Everyone believed battleships would still decide the war, not carriers. That is not true in the slightest.
People believed it was a combination of both of them.
Yeah.
Because both Japan and the Americans were looking at the Royal Navy going, our carriers are good and all, but what if those three come over the horizon and run them down?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And at that time, it's still very much possible.
I mean, just look how it's glorious for how carrier operations go wrong. Is it glorious that got sunk by Scharnhorst? Wait,
Yeah,
you'll know that one. Is it Glorious that gets run down by Scharnhorst and Gneisenau?
I think it is Glorious,
Glorious.
yeah. Glorious gets run down by Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, which we know she was operating against RN Doctrine and everything else.
Because the captain wants to get home sooner.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a case of everyone understood that. Sword and shield, come on, sword and board.
I mean, to be fair, this is also the reason why we all understood the Battle of Samara was such a funny shit show.
Because the Japanese battleships had no right to get as close as they did, and they did. And to be fair,
nor did the right Taffy 3s to get away.
No,
they should not have.
No, the battleships that should have been like the history books should have shown the Japanese fleet sweeping aside Taffy 3 and going on to inflict one of the rare Allied reverses of the 44, period.
Well,
Let's see.
That reverses it will hurt the U.S. a lot, but
yeah,
it's not. It will probably slow them down, but it's not reversing anything.
Leslie's giving some good.
But let's say I will point out that the Japanese did sort of look at Taranto and go, "Okay, this is how it works in practicality to a degree. We need to change this and this."
Knight, I would be very careful about calling various historical figures in command of warships idiots. Basically because hindsight is 20/20 and it's hard to tell whether something is idiocy, fog of war, or making a decision that preserves your ships and men for conflicts that you do not know what is to come.
Are we talking about
Yamato
of Glorious? Or...
I assume we're talking about the Captain of Glorious and / or I presume the forces off Samar.
Okay.
I mean, Glorious's captain was being very.
He was being a dumbass.
Yeah. In that case, I will admit that's one of the rare cases where it is very clear cut. But again, I would be very careful about saying that.
It's one of the rare
smart
times.
people make stupid decisions at times.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, Glorious Captain made the decision for a personal matter.
Yeah. 1981, Samar should have been US defeat, but Taffy 3 will do so much damage, and Oldendorf would send ships to help Taffy 3. The problem with Oldendorf sending the ships to help Taffy 3 is that even they're not going to get there in time. They're not going
They're not going to get there in time, nor do they have the ammunition left, because they've just been busy blowing up Fuso and Yamashiro.
Oh yeah, and of course, they're not even going to get there in time to prevent the Japanese ships savaging the landing zone. And then withdrawing.
Don't they have their own damage to contend to? Because
Yeah.
the Japanese force hasn't gone down without swinging.
Nope, it did.
Yeah.
It did do some swinging. That's quite right. So next question. Thoughts on the Bradley?
Alright, but Leslie,
Yeah,
I get the torpedoes were different, but it's a case of there's a difference between knowing it's possible in theory, and then seeing it done in practice and altering your own plans since you've seen with how you've seen it work in practice.
Like, we're aware there was a long-term plan for an attack on Pearl Harbor, but the actual scope of the final detailed planning and preparation for what would become Pearl Harbor really accelerates after Taranto.
But yeah, next.
Thoughts on the Bradley Blazer SHORAD system? Why did the U.S. Army adopt this SHORAD system and preferred the Stinger Bradley? So the second part of that question makes no sense grammatically. So I'm
I get what they're on about though.
The Bradley Blazer, from what I can tell, exists in a single image on Reddit, and is not a real vehicle, as far as I can see.
I mean, the way I see it, it's a lava turret on a Bradley hull. It could exist, but
It doesn't. It's not a real vehicle. Next question.
yeah, it's most likely not a real vehicle.
Would it be guaranteed that an Admiral or incomparable class carrier is going to be automated in some way? Well, all ships in the Steam and Steel era are automated in some way or another. That's just the way they are. From destroyers through to carriers. Not in the way which we consider automation today, but all vessels of that era have automatic systems aboard them.
A little bit more elaboration will be required for that question if that's not what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thoughts on the
really
kinetic
cool.
energy missile? Do you think it has better battlefield performance, like the penetration, power, accuracy, etc., than current anti-tank guided missiles with shaped charge HE? Well, I suppose the proof of the pudding
What's
is
this
in
for
the...
courses?
I would think the proof of the pudding is in the eating. The fact that kinetic energy missiles have not been adopted by any of the world militaries would kind of speak volumes to...
Yeah,
It's very simple. The US made a single test with the LOSAT, and then they realized, why the hell are we building missiles so big in order to kill something if toes is 500 times smaller and you can fit on anything. Chemical warhead penetration value is just going to be so much better in a area, space, or volume.
Starstreak is a different kettle of fish because it contains...
it does be kinetic rods, isn't it? If I remember correctly.
It's kinetic rods.
It is,
It's
but it's different.
Really tall kinetic rods.
Yeah, but it's different. It's a different kettle of fish. That in that case, because it's smaller kinetic penetrators, of which numerous are hitting a target, rather than gigantic tube of titanium be upon ye.
Fundamentally speaking, the problem with Starstreak is that its penetration value it's not comparable to conventional chemical warheads
It really isn't.
at the modern time. At
No.
least.
It's
Star
much more of
Trek
an
is-
anti-helicopter and light vehicle weapon.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
yeah,
it,
it is.
and anti-air weapon as well for tactical aviation.
Yeah, but I remember that they were used as part of their use is minimizing collateral.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That is very true.
There's a use case for them. It's just currently we don't need the use case.
Next question. Thoughts on the proposed tracked self-propelled missile battery on the M548 tracked carrier? Do you think the Patriot missile battery is better as is with the truck chassis? Yes. The Patriot is a theatre weapon system. It is not a tactical system. And as a theatre system, it needs the mobility that a truck-based chassis provides. It should not be in a area or theatre of operations or close enough to the front that it needs a self-propelled tracked chassis. If you are trying to use Patriot that way, you are using it wrong.
It's not with that. Patriot's not a single.
And yes,
Patriot's a
does
lot
take
like
into account-
HIMARS. It's 6 or 7
Well, no, HIMARS
trucks working together.
HIMARS can be used from a single launcher. You can do
Yeah,
that.
but so like,
Patriot also has multiple on a single launcher, but that isn't the point.
But the difference between what she's saying is that with Patriot you need the radar erector tracking vehicle, otherwise the launchers don't work. Whereas with HIMARS,
you essentially,
whereas with
it's
HIMARS,
a lot like with S300. People think of Patriot
like
as
any,
just a missile launched on the back of the truck.
it's like any theatre.
There's much more to it than that.
It's like any theatre air defence system, or in any country, any theatre air defence system at all. You have, you have your launcher, you have your erector launcher, and you have your tracking fire control vehicles. Do you think the RN has developed a much more capable and effective combat system than Aegis in the 80s?
Phoenix actually answered this in chat.
I know, but
Monday. If you scroll up, you could get the exact answer.
Well, I don't have to, because I can answer that one myself. No, of course they haven't. There is no weapons.
I mean,
Oh,
Patriot left that hard.
oh, no, they have not. Aegis still remains. Aegis plus the latest Mark of Standard missile is, and remains throughout its various years of existence the gold standard for a missile interception system. Even to this day, what the RN has doesn't even come close. What the RN has is good for what the RN needs, but it is not Aegis at all. Do you think the I-400 has had a long-lasting impact on the design of missile and ballistic missile submarines, even though the I-400 can only launch seaplanes? No. I think the I-400 showed the increasing trend towards larger submarines, and showed that you could actually make large submarines that could be handled when submerged and surfaced, and showed how the submarine was increasingly gaining further range, even as diesel-electric boats. But it didn't really have any impact on the design and construction of the submarines that followed it. Especially given by the time you see submarines approaching the size of the I-400 again, you're talking about entirely different methods of hull construction and entirely different hull shapes, which bring entirely different hydrodynamic challenges.
And
But if I'm
fundamentally,
friendly, isn't the I-400s the ones that have the primitive acoustic plates on them
No, both
to minimize their noise signature?
both the German and both the late model German and late Japanese submarines use the same sort of tiles. Since it was one of the
Japanese
things.
got them working.
No, so did the Germans. The Germans and the Japanese got them working. Both Axis powers did.
that really matters. Japanese submarine operations doctrine is quite different. They will light the hell up on a standard Aztec set as compared to a German U-boat.
It's 1936. After a series of lucky breakthroughs, jet engine development has advanced enough to be used in combat planes. How does that change air and naval air operations? Fundamentally, it just turns World War II into the Korean War. In terms of how aerial conflicts are fought. If you're talking about the jet engine being viable for combat aircraft, you're talking about single or twin engined fighters and tactical aircraft only. You're not talking about strategic bombers, because jet engines, or tactical bombers, because jet engines do not have the long range performance and reliability to be fielded in those platforms.
Pretty much.
Turboprop.
Even then, it's still more. You're still better off.
if you've got sort of non-first gen jet engines, you have a turboprop.
So
And let's be
fundamentally,
real, you could do funny things with strategic bombers with turboprops.
When
fundamentally,
the
the issue
technology
with
matures, Foxo, when the technology matures, early turboprops
Yeah.
still have some of the issues with reliability and efficiency.
so fundamentally, there's an issue with jet engines in 1936. The airframe, the aerodynamics is not there yet.
I don't.
Think about it.
No, you can field them, but what I mean is it becomes late World War II to Korea. So what you have is you basically have people using jet variants of what we would recognize as fairly familiar airframes, but they're still flying them in a fairly similar manner. It's not radically changed the Second World War. What it will do is perhaps drive different ways in which aerial combat is fought. You might see a lot more focus on energy retention and tactics. Well, then again, if everyone's using jet aircraft, then that basically it evens it out again. So at that point, you've basically got
Well,
Germany
no,
loses
the
the war
primary
faster.
no the it's just the primary focus is
well, yeah, of course,
the
Joe.
countries will now have a race on how to figure out how to build proper jet combat aircraft because the aerodynamic studies is not there yet.
Yeah.
Don't forget, in 1938, the P-38 basically redefined aerodynamics for combat aircrafts for fighters because P-38s suddenly start running into this. It's the first plane that could actually reach near Mach, region,
Yeah.
and the damn thing just refused to function. Can you imagine attaching a jet engine to something like a Spitfire?
Night. Yeah, the Aegis system was flawed in the 80s because it was brand new. And yes, the people who botched the interface are partially to blame for the 290 people killed on Iran Air 655. But I would also think that the pilot who literally refused to identify himself as a commercial flight in an active war zone is also to blame for that. I would also point out that you say that it's only the gold standard because the US got a brutal wake-up call thanks to the destruction of Iran Air 655, for which the flawed interface was to blame. Again, like I say, not entirely. There's also the idiotic pilot of that aircraft. And there's also the fact that it doesn't matter why. The fact is, Aegis still is the gold standard. The why doesn't matter.
Another thing. The question is, the UK have better system than Aegis does, which is fundamentally no. Yes, Aegis is flawed, but it's still the better
UK
system.
has plans for one.
Yeah.
Those plans it's sort of like how in the 80s the RAF had plans for a stealth fighter that had a smaller cross section than the F-111, so the F-117. But they didn't build it, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. The F-117
And if
still
it's on paper, and
fighter.
only on paper, you can't say it's better than something that actually exists.
Exactly. Aegis exists.
Reality has a habit of kicking you in the dick.
It's just the system exists and it's better than what the UK got, so the question is answered.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Alright, what's next?
Next question is... If you, the members of the panel, could chat with any fictional or non-fictional military commander for a full day, who would you each pick and why? That's really easy for me. I want to talk to Napoleon Bonaparte, and I want to talk to him about what the long-term goal was. Like, how did he plan to actually stabilize Europe? Like, did he have a long-term plan, or was he just going on whatever the mood took him that particular day? What was the plan after the invasion of Russia had succeeded, if it had succeeded at all? Like, he must have realized the continental system was causing problems. I would genuinely love to figure out what was going through that man's mind. How he gambled so spectacularly and failed so spectacularly.
Like, that's probably going to be annoying because it's same as it's been a lot of the questions being answered. Leif Erikson. Because I want to know how much of his saga is actually true. And what it was like crossing the Atlantic in the 10th century on what's a glorified galley. Like, don't get me wrong, longships was some of the best ships for their time. The issue is, it was still the 10th century. And hey, it would also be really interesting to get perspective on the native faiths of Scandinavia from someone who lived and breathed. Because like so much of what we've got of this time period all comes from Christian missionaries, and they've never been biased at all, have they?
Mm-hmm.
But it's just honestly, any of the big Viking adventurers I'd want to talk to. Just in general, because how? Like, how did you brave going so far from home in that time period? But yeah, mandatory Viking fan freak out aside.
That's fine. Thought.
Mine is probably going to be Mark Anthony. How the
Ooh.
hell do you lose a war against Octavian while owning more legions and having the more profitable part of the empire?
Well, the funny
What
thing
the
is
hell did he
that
do?
he wasn't a military leader. To be
Yeah, he was.
perfectly blunt, if you look at actual the records of antiquitian history, all of the campaigns in which he led, a lot of the actual strategic decision making and tactical decision making during actual conflict was handled by extremely capable subordinates. Mark Antony was a very good leader when it came to picking his subordinates and knowing where his limits were. The moment he forgot those limits, aka the war against Octavian, it all comes apart.
Alright, next.
Next question. Do you think the USA made the right decision in converting a few Baltimore-class and Cleveland-class cruisers into guided missile cruisers? Do you think the gun missile in the bow-aft arrangement is a very effective combination using the firepower they had, instead of all missile cruiser conversions like the Albany? Why didn't they convert the Worcester-class into light cruiser guided missile, since they're a newer hull with 6-inch dual-purpose guns? So, in order of answering them, yes, the US made the right decision, as it gave them a chance to test out the both partial and all missile cruiser configurations before actually committing to building purpose-built vessels. Do you think the gun missile arrangement in the bow configuration was effective instead of the all-missile cruiser conversion like the Albany? No, both are effective, because we see the US build examples of both afterwards. Both having a mixed gun and missile armament and pure missile armament are effective in the period the US is building these cruisers, and is proven as such. Why didn't they convert the Worcester class into light cruisers, since they're a newer hull with 6-inch dual-purpose guns? Because the Worcesters at the time are very, very valuable as assets that can deal with early anti-ship missiles and fast jet aircraft at ranges that the other ships in the fleet cannot, if they do not have missiles.
Not really. The US Navy hated the dual-purpose 6-inch.
No, they realized quite quickly that if you tried to cycle them at full speed, they wouldn't work. But if you actually toned it down a bit, they were fairly reliable and effective guns. It just took them a while to figure out what the Worcesters were good at.
Alright. Next.
Haldor Drago.
I too have a beard. It is full of tiny men. Kill them all!
Have you ever eaten a tangerine?
Would you like to try one? It's nice to see when me and Fox are on the same page. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does.
PTS, the best series ever. That can somehow take one of the most hated characters in all of Warhammer
And make it
as the
likeable.
Matwardian and make him into a badass. An insane badass, but a badass.
Thoughts on the USN stationing missile cruisers off the coast of North Vietnam as early warning radar picket ships to report and record aerial and VPF activity over North Vietnam with their powerful radars? Do you think it's too overpowered to do so for the USN? The said ship was codenamed Red Crown, conducting PIRAS missions. There is no such thing as overpowered during an actual shooting war in which your bone service people are dying. War is not fair. It is not a fair fight.
Unless it means overpowered as in the ship shouldn't have been that close because its radars were overpowered for the position it was in. It could have been further away and safer.
Even then, the
I
whole point
don't think so.
of it being close was to reach deep into North Vietnamese territory and cover the entire airspace, not just the area near the coast. Yeah, basically. No, it was not overpowered. They did entirely the correct thing by doing that. It made use of assets they had to enhance the effectiveness of their air operations in the Vietnam War. Do you think the RN copied the Red Crown mission during the Falklands to provide early warning with their ships? No, they just did standard radar picket duty that they had in their doctrine to protect against incoming naval strike.
It's
There's not,
a
there's
very
a...
interesting concept.
Yeah, it's, just because one person does something and another person does something doesn't necessarily mean they've copied. There is something called convergent evolution.
By that logic, everyone that's ever used radar pickets is copying the RAF because they used early air-to-air radar armed Wellingtons to screen out incoming aircraft to give the bombers and the defending aircraft heads up.
It's a picket. It's just the basic concept idea of putting some sensors much further out so that you see things further or coming in earlier is age old, or it's an age old tactic. That's why Roman legions walk around with scouts ahead.
It's literally a scout.
It's so that you have time to report back to the main body in terms of what is coming. It's just
And occasionally occasionally the picket ship is also the missile sponge. It's also the look at me, I've got my radar on, look at me, shoot missiles at me, look at me.
I mean, yeah, feel bad, but yeah, it's true.
In World War II, the RN was desperately short of cruisers, but in the early 1930s, 13 C-class cruisers were scrapped. How much better would the RN's global position be if they had been pawned off to the Dominions, and even then with any minor upgrades were still in service? First of all, you can't do that. That's specifically barred under
By the treaty.
the Washington and 1st and 2nd London. Secondly, the RN would like more cruisers, but the RN always wants more cruisers. The RN wasn't desperately short of cruisers in the Second World War. They just didn't have the overwhelming, crushing superiority that the Royal Navy always wanted.
And to be fair, D-class cruisers.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, honestly, they're not. You're not really radically changing much. Even if they run up against a particularly brave modern destroyer, they're going to have trouble.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know. The anti-aircraft cruiser conversions were bloody nasty for any small craft.
Well, yes, yes, small craft, but the reason,
including destroyers.
The reason the AA conversions are nasty is because the number of barrels and the rate of fire's gone way up. you've gone from I think 5-6 inch barrels to 10 to 12 4 inch. And at that point,
Yeah.
that's just daka 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 daka. But if you
But
have,
if you had more holes to convert, then
Yeah.
theoretically you have.
but the problem we've got is that it specifies only minor upgrades, and they're in Dominion and they're in the service of the Dominions, which
Oh, yeah,
basically
but they're not much use in that case.
Yeah. Like, even a well-crewed Fletcher would probably have a decent chance of coming out of a scrap with a C-Class, given the C-Class is much worse fire control, which might actually even the range out.
Yeah, it's going to depend on crews, because once those 6-inch start hitting, they'll hurt.
No, I think we have moved on from that question. We don't need.
Put it this way, why keep C-Class when build tribal?
Yep.
Basically, tribal isn't even.
Is 1960. The scramble for Antarctica has finalized. These are the borders that have been settled on. Let me try and get
Blow it up.
yeah, let me just try to copy that image. Paste. I can't paste it. It won't let me paste it. It won't let me paste it. That means I can't get it up
Wellesley,
to the...
you're here. Wellesley, you're here. Paste that image.
So basically,
His question.
there's a bunch of, for some bizarre reason, the people have decided to colonize Antarctica, despite the fact that Antarctica is not a place you really put colonies. It's stupidly, ridiculously hard to keep people living there, and any realistic colonial settlement is stupidly expensive for no gain. But sure, why not?
Until the 2000s, when they
yeah,
find
until-
ships
yeah.
of oil.
Pretty much.
Yeah. But either way, so basically, your design ships capable of patrolling the waters around these British holdings in this barren continent. You don't need to mine funds, you need to be sure these ships can secure the colonies. Yeah, here's the thing.
Have you heard
This
of an
is- I'm
Arctic
sorry.
exploration ship?
Yeah, this is the thing. I'm just gonna say this. You are not dealing with warships here. You are dealing with armed icebreakers and colony resupply ships. These are not warships designed to fight other warships. They might posture against other nations' resupply vessels, but that is all they do.
To be fair, 1960.
right.
What's the point?
right. The most you're going to see is someone putting an automatic 5-inch turret on something like a Lenin. The icebreaker.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically it.
And it's going to be a case of sort of, have you ever seen the engagement on from the videos of the Chinese warship, the Chinese and the Philippine Coast Guard, or the Taiwanese Coast Guard?
There'll be a lot
Yeah.
of that going
It's going to
on.
be like that.
But actually, funnily enough, probably not even that close, because with how far south things are and the areas, it's like ramming ships at sea is one thing. Ramming ships in Antarctica that
Having
could be used,
icebreakers.
yeah, but also
Yeah,
more to the point.
ramming each
but-
other
but-
with icebreakers.
Yeah, but also more to the point, actually ramming people with icebreakers, you know, when you're in the middle of, you know, Antarctica, and that ship could be life or death to certain civilians on the colony. It's not something that looks good internationally. It's not something that looks good domestically. So there probably won't be. There'll be a lot of posturing, but I don't think there'll be any ramming. This is the mapping question, by the way. If you want to take a look
Those
at
are
that, please
some
pause.
I do.
Really
I do.
weird borders, by the way. Why does the British get 3 different? chunks of
I don't
Antarctica?
understand it. It's Wellesley's
Because
incredibly
the British
weird
have bases
timeline.
on 3 different chunks of Antarctica.
More importantly, it's something the UN said, yeah, this is fine.
I don't understand it. It's Wellesley's weird map. Yeah, but so moving on. If the Soviets had an Italian continental war and British, we did that one already.
Yeah.
Thoughts on the U.S. Navy Navy Tactical Data System? Do you think the RN and RCN were the first to come up with the idea that the USN with the RN Data Comprehensive Data System and with the RCN DATAR? Do you think the two systems are better than the USN ones in terms of shipborne unified battlefield information gathering? Again, I said this before with the thing before, but I'll say it again. Do not ask us questions about modern equipment and especially things like this. They are top secret, their details are known only to those that operate them and work with them, and are not able to be revealed. We cannot answer this question.
We don't know. And those that do will probably not say.
Would it be right that having an Italian Continental War and British revenge in the interwar years in the Soviet Navy would force an infrastructure upgrade to support them? No, probably not.
No.
Thoughts on this DGV design? Do you think it's too dumb for the USN to even build or operate, even though it could work for Soviet style with their style aviation combat? No, it's a DGV. Just for reference, like, since it's in the document, I can't get the image, but it's basically a destroyer-sized vessel designed to operate helicopters and vertical takeoff aircraft.
It's a little bit bigger than a destroyer, but
No, it's 12,000 tons. It's about the same size as a Berk.
a Berg isn't 12,000 tons.
Or have they bloated to that, and it's me thinking?
They probably bloated to that by now.
Oh
in
no,
Flight
sorry,
3,
sorry,
but
sorry. They still haven't quite broken 9K. I'm so used to destroyers being bigger than I think they are.
They are, 12,000 tons more
Still,
closer to a
yeah.
Tincon, but
Yeah, but even so, it's still.
yeah, it's still
It's-
tiny.
It's still why would you bother? Like, you don't. It's too dumb for even the Soviets to operate, because even they would go, why? This gives us very little capability, very little reach. It's exceptionally vulnerable, has very little in the way of self-defense. It's not
I'm
needed.
actually trying to figure out what plane they're trying to operate out of that thing.
Yeah, it makes no sense to have a DGV. No.
How do you land? I don't get it.
Yeah. If the RN got one Eagle-style converted Admiral along with all three Courageous classes carriers, which is more realistic than getting all three Anson subclass Admirals converted, would one Admiral and three Courageous be as good as the USN and IGN got? To be blunt, whoever answered that question, all three Courageous class together were actually a better fit than the two monster carriers that the other nations got. Because, yeah, they got a pair of extremely capable platforms. The RN has three capable platforms.
More importantly, if they get an Admiral and 3 Courageous, they get to be funny and start testing whether if they should build super giga-size carriers or if they should
Or
just
stick
go
with
up by
things about the
smaller
Courageous size vessels.
if you give them that, you give the Royal Navy so much, or you cut down the Royal Navy's time on the, design studies in the 20s. They would, they would absolutely know what the future of carrier is, instead of having to testing around in waters.
So a clever, conniving RN officer makes sure the USSR ends up with a Vittorio Veneto off the Reggio Marina. What happens next? The Med would be interesting. No, it wouldn't. First of all, the officer who did that is quietly court-martialed and shot for betraying the United Kingdom. Secondly, the Russians have a full-on fast battleship now. So the US is probably going to finish the two remaining Iowas. Basically down to the fact that overmatch is a wonderful thing. Thirdly, this ship will probably be operated by the Northern or Baltic fleets rather than the Black Sea, given the only warship threat in the Black Sea is the old Turkish battlecruiser Yavuz, and she can be countered by modern Russian cruisers, destroyers, and an old Gangut if required. Are you all right there, C-Cube?
Oob.
Hey, C-Cube, we are working
Ooh.
through the questions, the catch-up ramblings. Just calm down.
Where dragon?
Seriously, dude, calm. There's no need to get angry. Just calm down. Working through the questions, but just calm down.
Wait, where's my dragon?
I don't
We
know.
don't know. He left for quite a while, actually.
He said he was going to be back, but he's not here. Do I sound angry? Given the all caps and the exclamation mark, yes.
Yes.
Either way, less attention on him, finish the question, and then we'll get to his question.
Yeah, but basically, you're left with a single solitary USSR capital ship. It will likely be run until such a time as it becomes uneconomical to keep, and it will likely be preserved as a symbol of what the USSR nicked off with from the capitalist West. And, you know, the Red Fleet's only modern battleship it ever operated. What if United Nations warship Victory, Anarchy in the UK? She's HMS Victory.
Is that a famous song?
I haven't... not sure.
The famous song Anarchy in the UK.
Wasn't Hosh the inspiration to Monopoly's battleship, please? No, that was the battleship Indiana. And that is that. All done inside of 2 hours. Not bad, all told. That is all sorted. That
They're
is...
out of 10, not enough arguments.
Hey, we did all right. Honestly, I enjoyed it. It was nice to actually have a relatively quiet ramblings with no arguments.
I didn't.
Leslie said yes, by the Sex Pistols. I hope you've all enjoyed this week's catch-up ramblings. Obviously, tune in on Sunday for Fleet's Sunday streaming, which will see. It seems to be more and more people want me to play the UK, which is going to be interesting. Probably go Imperial Federation. That'll be fun. I hope you all enjoyed Catch-Up Ramblings. Tune in, obviously, on Monday for Ramblings as normal. So we keep doing well so far. Hope everyone has enjoyed. I keep saying that. I keep going around in circles. Fleet's brain is just...